Hello there, once again, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation, and packing for walking the road to Santiago, as well as tips, tricks, and hacks to make your journey along the way a lot more enjoyable. The Camino de Santiago was one of the best months of my whole life, and I want you listeners to have that great time that I had too. And to that end, we have an interview with David Sheehan, who has walked the Camino Portuguese from Lisbon all the way to Santiago. Also, the spiritual variant of the Camino Portuguese and the coastal Camino all the way up through Portugal, and a good slice of the Camino Frances too. So, David, please take us back to the time and place where you first decided to walk the Camino.
Well, the first time I heard about the Camino de Santiago was I was actually in fourth grade. I was doing an SRA reader, which is kind of part of the reading program that we had in schools back then. And there was one of the readers that I was completing was about pilgrims. And so I went home as a 10-year-old, 9 or 10-year-old, whatever I was, and I went home and I started looking up in the World Book Encyclopedia about the Camino de Santiago. And from that point on, it was always in my mind, and at various points through my life, some type of reference to the Camino or to pilgrimages or whatever came up, and I always said, someday I'm going to do that. And finally, in 2017, I did.
So what was it when you, as a 9 and 10-year-old, can you remember? What was it that first grabbed your attention? Was it the magic of the stories that you'd heard, the thought of walking across one whole country? What actually captivated you and made that seed grow in you?
I think it was just the fascination that people would walk across an entire country, like they'd walk into this remote spot in northwest Spain, and it seemed very kind of magical, mystical to me and things. And like I said, I was very curious, so I went home and I read a little bit about it in the World Book Encyclopedia. And then it seemed like every few years after that, some reference about the Camino de Santiago would enter my life, whether it was through a magazine article in National Geographic, or whether it was through like reading Pillars of the Earth, Ken Follett's book. He mentioned Santiago, and whatever it was, I always found myself kind of drawn to it, and I always said, someday I want to do that. I live in New England, so many people, the Appalachian Trail in America is one of, and the Long Trail in Vermont, two of these long through routes or through hikes that people take. And I don't know, it just always fascinated me about walking across Spain. And so, again, an opportunity came up for me to do it in 2017, and I kind of just jumped at the chance, I guess. I just said enough about talking about it, and I just have to do it.
So what opportunity arose for you to be able to do it? Because it's not an easy thing to just say, hey, I'm just going to go and walk all the way across Spain or all the way up through Portugal. How did you make that time and space in your life?
Well, my parents passed away in 2014. They both passed away in 2014. And on the anniversary of my mom's death, my son and I flew to Ireland, and we climbed Croagh Patrick, which is Ireland's only mountain. And so it was February 17th, 2015, we climbed Croagh Patrick, and that kind of reignited my idea about doing the Camino. And I came back, and there were various Irish Caminos that you can take, shorter ones, obviously, much shorter, but kind of reignited my passion for it, I guess. And then I read an article from a professor from the University of College Dublin, where he was trying to piece together the pilgrim route from Dublin to Ballyhack in County Wexford, I think. And now that would be the way that everyone thought that pilgrims originally left Dublin and sailed to Europe. And he tried to retrace this using all sorts of old maps and information and things like that. And he finally said that he thought that there was a route that went from Dublin south along the coast to Ballyhack. And then again, it just kept coming back to me. And then I flew on a different trip in 2016, and wouldn't you know, the magazine on the flight had an article about Santiago de Compostela. So I said, I've got to do this. It keeps calling me, and I've got to finally do it. So in 2017, I started to do some research about it. And then I started to explore airlines and possible transportation. And I finally found a airline that flies seasonally from my area, and the rates were very cheap, and I said, this is it, I've got to go. And so that's what led me to it.
So would you say in some ways it was maybe a tribute to your parents?
I think so. I think, I think that's what finally kind of was that last kind of impetus to make me go. It's time to go, and time to do it, time to stop talking about it, and just do it. And that's exactly what I decided. It was something I had done and watched a lot of videos on YouTube and movies and read books and things like that. And I just, the opportunity, I was looking at airfares and things like that, and I finally came across an airline that flies seasonally from my local airport.
Which is?
Providence.
Right, so Rhode Island.
Providence, Rhode Island, yes. There's a large in Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. There's a large population of people from the Azores and Portugal. So they fly charters, I guess you might call them. It's a seasonal airline. They fly from June through Labor Day, through June through early September, and then they have a few flights that they fly around the holidays. So I just happened to catch one that was before the peak season, so to speak, and I was able to get a very, very reduced airfare. And I said, this is it, I've got to go. If I didn't need any other signs, that was certainly it. So that's one of the reasons I chose the Portuguese route. Doing research on the French route just seemed to be more complicated. Flying from different airports, getting to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, all that stuff, it just seemed to be more complicated, more expensive at that time. And when this came up, I said, well, this is definitely a sign that it's time for me to go.
All right, so we know we've kind of heard in previous podcasts, we had Canadian pilgrim Pascal Augier say that three of the most important things to get right are your backpack, your footwear, and your socks. So it's really important that we take some time to research those and try and test them. But aside from those three things, what would be the first three things that you'd put in your backpack were you to return to the Camino tomorrow?
I would say the first thing that I would bring with me was anything to do with protecting yourself from the sun. So a nice wide brim hat, sunscreen, lip balm. A lot of people forget about lip balm or chapstick to protect your lips. Other than that, it's pretty basic. You have the clothes on your back and one other change of clothes. So you're wearing one set and you're washing the other set. And that's pretty much all you need and have. I did have a rain jacket, a windbreaker with me, and along the way I ended up having to buy a very light polar fleece on the way to Finisterre. We got caught in some very heavy rain, kind of cold and clement days, I think. We were up in the hills too. And so I ended up stopping along the way, and I bought a light polar fleece that I still have, and it's But other than that, there's not a lot that you really need.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you and I kind of have a similar approach to our Caminos, because I always try to limit my clean change of clothes to one set, obviously to reduce weight. And that just means you've got to clean your clothes religiously after you walk at the end of each day. Make sure you clean them as soon as you get to the albergue or your hotel, so they're ready for the next day and hung up to dry that's your walking clothes. Then you put on that clean change of clothes that you've got that you keep for off Camino. The windbreaker for obvious reasons, and the fleece to keep warm for obvious reasons. And something that can be overlooked and underestimated the importance of, which would be some kind of sun protection for your skin. Obviously, like you said, a wide brim hat, because no matter what time that you walk any of the Caminos in the Iberian Peninsula, where it's in the Portuguese part or the Spanish part, you are going to be exposed to a lot of hours of sunshine. So even if you're going in the winter, you do need that as well. So great advice there.
Yeah, I would also I would just add that the clothes that you bring, performance weight, so they dry very, very quickly, and the socks that I wore, merino wool. I think merino wool socks are important to have as well. They don't retain any type of odor. They dry very quickly, and they're very comfortable. They reduce friction on your feet and things like that, and reduce the chance for blisters and such.
Talking of feet and blisters, did you have any foot care routines that worked for you and you'd recommend for others?
Well, I would recommend Vicks Vapor Rub. I know a lot of your listeners and people you've interviewed talk about using Vaseline or petroleum jelly. I would use Vicks Vapor Rub. It's a topical analgesic. I don't know, do you have the Vicks Vapor Rub in the UK?
We do, and they have it in Spain, and it sounds a little bit different. They call it Vicks Vapor Rub.
Okay.
Vicks Vapor Rub.
I would use it because it's very versatile. Besides, it's not as goopy on your feet. It's an ointment rather than like the petroleum jelly, which can get very goopy. It helps to. It's versatile because you can also use it if you have sore muscles at the end of the day. It's a topical analgesic. Also, because it has a lot of essential oils in it, it helps to keep away the bed bugs, supposedly. So there's a lot of versatility to Vicks Vapor Rub, and I just made sure that I did that every morning before I, set out. Just take a couple of minutes every morning to just make sure I put the Vicks Vapor Rub on my feet, put my socks and shoes on. And then other than that, when I was done with my shower, I put on my sandals, and at some point along the way there during the late afternoon, evening, and things like that, I would treat my feet with the Vapor Rub one more time. So I was doing it twice a day. But I just, other than that, you really, just have to make sure you just care for your feet. But I think, again, having good shoes, having quality socks are important.
So you could say, as they say in Spain, if you're listening and you want to go into Spain and get some Vicks Vapor Rub, you can sing it to them, Vicks Vapor Rub, and like you said, you apply it twice a day. It's less goopy than Vaseline. It keeps your feet smelling good as well. It's a topical analgesic, and it can also be good for repelling bed bugs as well. So lots of reasons to carry Vicks Vapor Rub instead of Vaseline. Never heard that one before, David, and so thanks for the new angle on foot care. Now, let's talk about, I'd like to ask you a big question. I mean, you wanted to do the Camino for a long time. You finally got on the Camino. It'd been a long time since you were a 9-10-year-old. So, if you were to do the Camino again, was there a mistake you made on your Camino that you wouldn't make again and recommend others pay attention to or be aware of?
I just think that I would take a little bit more time and not necessarily have kilometers on my mind all the time. I always felt like every day I had a destination or a point I wanted to get to, and I always made it. In fact, I usually did at least, especially when I was by myself, I was doing 2.5 times the miles that are recommended in the books. I was really, I move along very quickly. I do a lot of miles at home on my own. So I would just slow down a little bit. Although in my case, I'll tell you, I had a fortunate case because in the middle of June 2017, there was a huge forest fire in central Portugal. And because I moved at the rate I did, I actually was beyond that fire by the time I picked it up on the news. And had I been going at sort of a normal rate, I wouldn't have been in the fire itself, but I would have been in that region, you know. I didn't know, obviously I didn't know about it. In fact, I didn't, it was a few days later while I was walking, I stopped into in one of the small villages to stop and get a drink. And they had like the news on, and I'm watching the news, and, you know, and they're showing the map of where the map was. And I'm like, I felt like, boy, I've got to contact my family just to let them know that that I had probably 2 or 3 days beyond it at that point. But had I been walking slower, I would have been in the area, the region. I wouldn't have been in it, I don't think. But it was a major fire. It led to, I think, 3 days of the national mourning in Portugal that summer. So I think very fortunate in that case.
But if you were to go again, you'd basically recommend others to, if they've got the luxury of time, to take their time and slow down a bit.
Yeah, I think there's some nice towns and cities along the way that I would have liked to maybe spend an extra day in, or not simply pass through. I'd spend a lot of times as I was going through a town, I would, stop long enough to maybe rest for a few minutes, get something to eat. I'd look around, and then I'm like, okay, I'm back at it. Where I think if I was to do it again, I'd slow down, relax, and kind of enjoy it a little bit more, take in a little bit more. It's funny, when I was walking alone, I walked at a very fast pace, and then when I met up with people along the way, again, I would slow down to be with them and stay with them, and that was very nice. So I felt like I had a nice mix between that time alone and the solitude, and then also having company and making friends along the way.
I think that provides the perfect segue into the next question, which would be, we don't often hear about the cities, towns and village along the Camino Portuguese. So is there a place that if you had to choose one place that a pilgrim visits, and maybe if they do have the luxury of time, could spend a bit more time there, what place would you recommend?
Well,
and why?
Well, Lisbon, the old town of Lisbon is great, and I really, because the way my travel plans were kind of upset a little bit getting there and stuff, I didn't really stay in Lisbon. I was behind. There was some delays with the flights. So I landed in Lisbon, I went to the cathedral, and I just started walking. I felt like I was behind schedule. In my mind, what my schedule was. Tomar is beautiful. I think it's Coimbra is another beautiful town.
I'm going to put you on the spot, though. You've got to choose one. I want you to choose one. If it had to be one. It's a difficult one, I know, because all of those places you mentioned are amazing, but you've got to choose one.
If I only had to choose one along the entire route, it would be Porto.
Okay, agreed.
If I could only choose one city along the entire route, it would be Porto. I actually was in Porto on 3 separate occasions because of the way I traveled and the routes that I took. So Porto was a pretty amazing city.
Tell us what you liked about Porto and why you'd recommend that they spend some more time there if they can.
I think there's just a lot of history there. There's a lot of things you can do. Porto's also, they have all the wine cellars across the river. I was in Porto for one of the major religious festivals, so there's a lot of celebrations that were going on. It's a large city, but it's still readily accessible in terms of getting around and figuring things out. So I think it had kind of a real old world flavor to it. The area down by the river is spectacular. Crossing the bridge and going to Gaia across the river is just spectacular. So if there was one place that I would stay and return to and say, well, gee, I want to spend 2 or 3 days just relaxing, exploring, it would be Porto.
I completely agree with that. I've been there, I think, 3 times. And I think the first time my wife and I went there, it really, really surprised us how beautiful it was. I just had no idea. Because you hear about famous cities, obviously Lisbon's probably more more famous than Porto, and you hear about big cities and famous cities, London, Paris, New York, Venice, but Porto really took us by surprise. And that area down by the river, all the restaurants and the wine cellars overlooking the river, and the bridge and the castle on the hill looking over the banks, it's just idyllic. And it's every corner you turn, it's a photo opportunity. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And from favourite city, town or village to one specific albergue you'd recommend pilgrims stay at on the Camino, Frances or Portuguese?
Well, I found, I'm just looking at it now. It was Albergue Casa de Sardo, which is in Correco. And it was beautiful. It was I think it was a 15th century farmhouse. It had been transferred and had been in the hands of this same family since the 16th century, I think. And it was modernized inside, and yet you still had the feel and the flavor of this old building. I mean, that was beautiful. Redondela was beautiful. They have a municipal albergue in Redondela, which is an old nobleman's house. Same thing.
Yeah, it's just like stone walls and everything. Yeah, it's beautiful.
You get that exterior structure. And the day that I was in Redondela, it was the end of their, I guess, school year, but they had the music conservatory playing in that square immediately right outside of the building. So that was a beautiful one. And then Armentera, which is it had just opened. It was a municipal albergue, and it had just opened. It's on the spiritual route. So I guess the first day you stay on the spiritual route. And it had just opened, and it was being run by a mother and daughter, and it was spotless. I remember I took my shower and got into my clothes and everything, and I'd forgotten my toothbrush and toothpaste. So I left, went back to my bunk to grab my toothbrush, toothpaste. By the time I walked back, they had already gone in there, and it was spotless. I mean, they took such pride in running the place, and it had only been open for a few weeks by the time I got there. So that was another nice one. But there's so many along the way. I mean, there are so many beautiful places to stay along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I've stayed at that one in Redondela as well, the municipal albergue, right in the centre of town, isn't it? And the river runs right next to it, so you can kind of go out the albergue and just kind of sit by the river, really listen to the sound of the water trickling by, and it's right in the centre of town as well, so you've got everything really close. So yeah, I'd really agree with that one. And if you could just be more specific, and if you don't mind. Excuse me. The first one was Albergue Casa de. I didn't quite catch it.
De Sardo. Sardao.
Sardao. Sardao. Okay. Excuse me, frog in my throat. And that's in the town of.
I think it was called Careca. Careco. So. I didn't follow kind of the normal stages because I tend to walk a little bit faster when I'm by myself. So I didn't follow the normal stages that are in a lot of guidebooks. So this was a beautiful one. Again, it was a private albergue. And it sat up on the hill, and he had, it was the old farmhouse, but then he had kind of a patio area, and you watched the sunset to the west. Maybe about a mile and a half up in the hills away from the beach. And it was just beautiful. It was just a beautiful location. He was very nice. Small group of people. There were probably a dozen of us there that night. And we had a nice big communal meal and things like that. So it was just fun. Those are the things that you remember, kind of those communal meals and things like that as you're traveling along, the people you meet from all over the world. I mean, it's really remarkable.
Okay, so that's the Albergue Casa de Sardao, I think is how they would pronounce it in Portuguese. That's Casa do Dosardao, and that is in the town of Correço. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly because my Portuguese isn't nowhere near as good as my Spanish, but look that up, and 16th century albergue and all the reasons that David just said. And also the albergue in municipal albergue in Redondela. Okay, so let's ask you now, we're going to go into some Camino quickies before we get back to the main discussion. So short, sharp, quick answers to each of these questions, and then we'll get back to the main discussion. So, David, your favourite Camino blog and or book?
I believe my favorite blog I guess it's the Stingy Nomads. They have a website. They also produce a number of videos. They have a lot of good information. They break down the Caminos stage by stage and give a lot of good information about things to do, places to go. So that was one that I follow now.
So Stingy Nomads, good stuff. Favourite Facebook group or forum that you found helpful?
The Camino forum with Ivar Rekvi. I used that when I was preparing to go on the Camino. I was on that multiple times a day, and there's multiple threads for various discussions. So you can get a lot of information, a lot of updated information about whichever Camino. In fact, as I was trying to decide which Camino I wanted to take and why, I looked at the various threads and discussions, and that's why I finally came back to the Camino Portuguese.
That's Camino de Santiago.me. Okay, so have you got a favourite Camino vlog and or film?
Well, I like The Way. I think everybody watches The Way at some point. But Footprints, it's called Footprints, The Path of Our Life. That was produced a few years ago. That's very, very good. I'll Push You is also a very, very good one.
Favourite food and or drink on the Camino Portuguese and or Frances?
Pimientos Padrón.
All right, yeah, the Pimientos de Padrón.
And then I love the fresh squeezed orange juice. As you'd be walking, you'd stop early, mid-morning, and you'd get the fresh squeezed orange juice as you went along. And I always found that to be very refreshing.
So the zumo de naranja, the orange juice freshly squeezed in the morning, always good for a bit of vitamin C, and the padron peppers. And if you eat the padron peppers, remember, supposedly 1 in 20 is the hot mama. So take care, everybody. One thing you wished you'd packed?
I think I wish, if I look back and I do it again, I think I would download to my iPhone. I think I would download one of the guides or apps. My mindset going into it was I'm very detail oriented, so my mindset going in was tourist plan and expect. A pilgrim's going to discover and accept. So I had ideas of where I wanted to go. I had a couple of index cards just written with the stages and things like that. But I think if I was to do it again, I might consider getting a European SIM card and or downloading one of the apps for places to stay, albergues, things like that. But other than that, again, it's pretty simple. You don't need a lot to do the Camino.
One thing you didn't need and wouldn't take again?
Well, actually, when I came back, I had my packing list. Everything I brought with me, I used at some point. So I felt like I had done a good job planning and packing and preparing, because absolutely everything that I had in my pack, I used at some point. And there was nothing that I didn't use or need at some point. So, maybe I had my wide brim hat, and then I had a baseball cap instead. And you really don't need the baseball cap, I guess. That might be one thing that I could have just left behind. But I brought the cap because it has it's like a backpacking cap, so it has lights. It has a small LED light on it. So I brought that with me, so I wouldn't disturb people.
Is a cap with a light on it?
Yeah, LLB. Well, I don't know if you can say, but I'm sure a lot of other outfitters make it. It's good. It's just kind of like a small kind of like watch battery that it operates off of, and it's got a little LED light that just comes on the brim, and you use it when I'm doing normal backpacking. I tend to wear that and bring that with me all the time. But it's kind of a neat little thing rather than the big bulky headlamp that people have and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I like it. Something that doubles up as a light and a cap and a sun protector. Good stuff. No, haven't heard that one before, David. So always good to build up our Camino knowledge. I can pass on this one if nothing springs to mind, but a quote or meditation, inspirational mantra for the road.
Uh, like I said, I think as I was going, I had in my mind um, that tourist. This wasn't a tour for me. I wasn't being a tourist. I liked the history. I liked the socialization. I liked everything about it. But it wasn't a tour. I was treating myself as a pilgrim. And my idea was that, tourists plan and expect, pilgrims discover and accept along the way. So that was one thing. And then I think
I really like that. I really, really like what you just said. So tourists plan and expect, pilgrims discover, and the last bit?
accept,
Accept.
ACCEPT.
Lovely. I really like that.
So just, and it kind of, when you felt sometimes, what am I doing? Should I have stopped at the last place? Should I keep moving? Should I have, stayed a little longer here or there? I just, because when I go on a normal vacation, I'm very detail oriented about where I'm going, what I'm doing, things like that. And in this one, I had a flight to Portugal. I had a return date home from Portugal, and I had a destination I wanted to get to. And everything else was supposed to just kind of go and stream along, just kind of free flow along the way.
And we can kind of go back to the main discussion quite naturally from there. And would you say that experience of living with that mentality whilst on your pilgrimages to Santiago, has that helped you flow along the way with life at all since you've come home?
I think it has, yeah. I'm still very detail oriented in what I do and about my work life and things like that. But I think outside of that, I just have a greater sense of gratitude and appreciation just for the little things in life. I think one thing that the Camino does for you is it instills a great sense of gratitude for things great and small, and as you're walking along, you get to appreciate little things, cool drink, a hot shower, a nice meal, or things like that. But then also you have time to think about a lot of the larger blessings that you've had in your life, like my family or, things like that, and how much you appreciate and a sense of gratitude about other things. Because I think a lot of times you can be constantly, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? I think in the kind of the pace of modern life, I think it's a lot of checklists, but not a lot of time to reflect. And I think that's one thing that the Camino really gives you, is an opportunity to reflect on a lot of things.
And I really like what you said there about the gratitude for things great and small. And that is one of the biggest things I take away from doing my Caminos, is that, the most simplest pleasure does become like a 5-star luxury, like, hot water in an albergue. It just feels like the best thing in the world. Whereas when you're at home, you just take that for granted every day, that your tap's gonna give you hot and cold water, and maybe fizzy water instead of tap water that you get along the way. It feels like a treat. And when you go back to your normal life, all of those things that you did take for granted, now you do appreciate a lot more. And so, that's something I really, one of the reflections I took as well. And I wonder, I always like to ask about one standout memory or story or encounter with other pilgrims, because I think these are the things that often define our pilgrimages. Just one random act of kindness that someone carried out for you, or you carried out for someone, Could be a funny character you met along the way. Can you recall a funny, inspiring or quirky moment along the Camino that embodies everything that's good about it?
I think you talk about, people talk about Camino angels. And there was a day that I had crossed from Portugal into Spain. And I was doing probably a much longer day than I probably should have. And there was supposed to be plenty of potable water along the way. And it wasn't. It was hot. It was dry. And I was really kind of desperate. And then all of a sudden I came across this Austrian who was biking. He was biking. He had already completed the Camino de Santiago, and now he was just biking all over Spain and Portugal. And he offered me, I asked him, I said, is there any water up ahead? And he said, no, but he goes, would you like beer? So he had, in his backpack, he had these huge bottles. I don't know how many, maybe 48 ounces or whatever. They were huge bottles of beer. And he goes, oh, do you want a beer? And I'm like, oh no. I said, I'll pass out. I'm so dehydrated. And he says, well, I have water. Take my water. And I said, no, I don't want to take all your water. Don't worry. So he was a real funny, enjoyable guy. We were together maybe, 10 minutes at most. And that was just kind of this, random thing along the way. I think my favorite moment along the entire Camino was actually when we were in Finisterre. So we went to, the lighthouse and the cliffs beyond the lighthouse, and to watch the sunset. And it was there at that point I had met a whole bunch of people along the way, the people that I walked to Finisterre with, and they had met other people along the way. And then you're there in the cliffs, and all of a sudden, these people that you met from your first Camino have finally arrived. People that they had met on their Caminos had finally arrived. And it was just, we walked back into town, and there was they were having a music festival in Finisterre. And it was just so funny. I had people from literally 6 different continents who had met on the rocks at the lighthouse. And we're walking back into town. There's a music festival, and we just, a German band playing American rhythm and blues, singing in English, and they're there with people from Germany and Belgium and South Africa and Brazil and Japan. It was just really a fun time. And I said, this is why I came for this sort of international camaraderie, or whatever you want to call that. It was really a great experience.
I don't think that could have been described any better, the international camaraderie. And talking of that, I mean, the fact that you just mentioned there's an Austrian, you said he was Austrian, correct? The guy with the beers?
He was Austrian, yeah.
Well, I mean, I studied with 2 Austrians, and they had a saying, and their saying was, where there is beer, there is Austrians, and where there is Austrians, there is beer. So you've just proved that point as well, and I shall relay that story to them, and I think they'll laugh about it when I see them next. Just before we finish, David, I'd like to quiz you, if I may, about the Camino Portuguese, should I say. And you've walked the spiritual variant, you've walked the coastal Camino, you've walked the inland Camino from Lisbon to Santiago de Compostela. For someone that maybe is looking for a different Camino to the Camino Frances, number 1, would you recommend it? And 2, could you just speak about the differences between all of those Caminos and maybe a few positives and negatives?
Okay, if there's someone looking to do it the first time, my suggestion would be to do the one that I did, which was go to a Porto, or at least start in maybe Tomar or someplace like that. The walk from Lisbon to, say, Tomar is
tough.
Yeah, and it's I don't want to say it's pretty. But there's not really a lot other than to put miles behind you. And I don't want to insult those towns and villages along the way, but if I were to do it again and I was to say someone was going to go, I'd say start in Porto, do the coastal route with the spiritual variant, and then make sure you go to Muxia and then Finisterre. That's one thing that I would tell people if they were going to go to Muxia and Finisterre. For me, we went to Finisterre because we were meeting people there, and then to Muxia the following day. We walked to Muxia the following day because we were meeting some other people there who were going to take a bus to meet us. And we were walking, but they were going to take a bus and meet us. And I would say go to Muxia first and then go to Finisterre. If you're going to do that, complete that sort of walk to the end of the earth, so to speak. But yeah, the walk from Lisbon to Porto is nice. There's a lot of, again, Tomar is beautiful, Coimbra is beautiful. I think it's called Ambuja, which is early. Nice town.
As Ambuja, yeah.
That's a couple of days in. But if it were me, I think I would do the Camino from Porto, and I would do the coastal Camino.
That's actually a really, really good recommendation, because then you can stretch that into, you can put another week on top of that as well, can't you? To do Finisterre and Muxia.
Yeah, it's a few days. It's probably 3 days to, as you leave Santiago, you come to the fork in the road, and as Yogi Berra would say, you take it. So you come to, as you're leaving Santiago, you come to a point where if you go to the right, you're going to go to Muxia, and if you go to left, you're going to go to Finisterre. And it's about the same distance walking from that point on to either place. And then it's a one-day walk to connect the two. So when you walk either from Muxia to Finisterre or from Finisterre to Muxia, it's a one-day walk that way. Going to either Finisterre or Muxia is usually about 3 days.
And I mean, I said going to Finisterre after Santiago de Compostela was, I called it my lap of honor, because it was just, I didn't want it to finish, so I wanted an excuse to carry on, like an athlete kind of finishes and they do a lap of honor. So you would recommend that as a lap of honor if people have time?
Oh, absolutely. I think Santiago is beautiful and everything that's about it, but I really think that going to Finisterre in particular was just, it brought like a sense of closure to everything. You're there on the rocks beyond the lighthouse. People walk up there from the town and they bring bottles of wine and they bring beers, and you have your pimentos padron, and you're meeting people that you haven't seen sometime in several days, or even possibly, for me, it was a couple of weeks. A young woman that I had walked with early from Lisbon to that first part from Lisbon to Porto. Was completing my second Camino, basically. She was completing her first Camino, and we're there with my friends. All of a sudden, she comes up from behind, gives me a big hug, and it was nice, to say I hadn't seen her since. I walked with her for about 2 or 3 hours that day when I walked with her, and I hadn't seen her since that time. And then she recognized me, came over, gave me a big hug, and it was funny. It was just, I think there's just something about going to Finisterre that if you're going to put in the time and effort to complete the Camino, go to Finisterre and walk it. Don't just take the bus here, walk it. And like you said, it's your victory lap. I think I think it's just so important to do that.
Well, David, I'd like to thank you very much for all your really helpful tips that you've given to the listeners that will be going on their first Caminos or returning very soon. For whenever and if you do decide to go back to do the Camino from Rhode Island, I just want to say thank you once again and wish you the Camino motto, which is all clear, move forward with courage.
Thank you.